All right, so this is a router, and in the shop we have three different sizes of routers that we use. This is a pretty common size for a handheld router. There's also this much smaller one over here, and this is called a laminate or a trim router. And you can see that this one you can generally hold with one hand. This one is going to need two hands to run it. And then we have our much bigger router that we use very rarely in the shop, and this happens to be a plunge router. And what that means is once you get it going, you can plunge down into your work and then start going. So you can do a start and stop from the middle of a piece. These do have plunge attachments to them. I think you can get one for the smaller one as well. But this one is permanently set up in a plunge, and this is also a much more powerful router than this one, and a ton more powerful than this little guy. For our class, these are going to be the most two commonly used ones, and probably this one will be used more than anything we use in the entire shop. And what a router does is, it's kind of like a drill. It's got a motor that just spins this cutter in here, and you can see the cutters come in a bunch of different profiles. So we can do, like this is a round over bit, so it just does a 1/4 inch round over. And then this one cuts a slot, so if you want to cut like a dado or a rabbit, you can use this one. And then there's some that have fancy edges on them, like this one. This looks like it's an OG edge, so it's got a little cove, a little bead to it, and a step. They come in a million different sizes and profiles. You can see I've got this entire set right here, in addition to this whole box of them over here. But for most projects we're going to use the shop for, we just stick to a couple, just to keep it kind of simple. The one we're going to use today is a 1/4 inch round over bit, and it's already set up in here, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it in there and pull this one apart and show you what's going on here. So when we have a router, this locking attachment right here comes undone, and you can take this whole base plate off, and then what that gets you down to here, before I do anything I'm going to make sure it's unplugged, is this is called a collet, and it's very similar to the way that the chuck worked over at the drill press, but it's a little bit different, and I'll show you how. So we're going to undo this. It's got a wrench here, and down here. Loosen it up, and your bit should come out fairly easily. If not, just give it a little bit more. There we go. And then your cutter comes out. You can see this is a straight slot cutter, and it's got a 1/4 inch shank on it. So they'll come usually in a 1/4 or a 1/2 inch. I try and buy half if I can. They're a little bit more sturdy in the shop. But this shank goes into the collet, and what the collet does is it's a taper that comes down here. So as you screw this down, this taper goes deeper and deeper into the recess in here and starts to squeeze on that shank on this. Now, when we insert these, what you want to do is you want to take it all the way out, blow it out. You can use compressed air if we have a compressor going, or you can just use your mouth and blow in there. Make sure there's no sawdust in there. We're going to get the collet placed back in, and then I'm going to insert the bit, and I'm going to get it all the way down as low as it'll go. Once it's as low as it'll go, I'm going to back it up and out 1/8 of an inch. And what I don't want that bit doing is sitting on the very, very bottom up against the motor, because a lot of the vibration in the motor can transfer through and eventually loosen the whole thing up. So we want to pull it up about 1/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to put this wrench on, righty-tighty, get it nice and tight, and then we would be good to go on our cut as soon as we get this on. And this is where we can adjust our depth. So we're going to bring this up or down depending on how deep we want that to be. So I can get out my square, and I can just set it, and this has a little depth on it, so if I want to go down 1 inch, I can set it right there, lock it down, and then I know that that depth is going to be set to an inch. Now, when we use these routers, these are really, really kind of a dangerous tool to use. And the reason for that is we have this cutter that's spinning really fast. This cutter normally spins at about 35,000 revolutions per minute. So if for some reason you get your finger in there, it's going to give you a whole lot of cuts really, really quickly. These bits are really, really sharp. So it's the safest bits to use on these are sharp bits, so we always have to make sure that they are sharp and clean before we use them. So some of the safety gear we're going to need: one, it's a loud machine, so I've got my hearing protection here. Two, you can see there's not a whole lot of shrouding around it. It's going to send a lot of sawdust out, but it is a power-driven machine, so we're going to have to wear safety glasses also. I'll wear those over my glasses. And then three, I'm going to throw on a respirator just because I don't want to be breathing the dust that's coming off of this. So I think in the future, everybody's going to be more comfortable wearing a mask or a respirator. An N95 will do just as good of a job as this one. This one's just a little bit more comfortable because I have to wear it all day, and I usually do wear it all day. So that's the safety gear. All right, so now I'm going to set up for my first cut, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the router over here unplugged, get my safety equipment out of the way, and this is the board that I want to cut on. And what I want to do with this is I'm just going to do a round over on this edge. So to do that, I need to clamp it to the table because it's going to be the safest way to do this. You should always have your work clamped down when you start routing. It's just too easy for this thing to get enough momentum on it to shoot it across the room or shoot the router off in another direction. So I'm going to come out to this corner of the table right here. I've got my clamps. Get those down. Tighten that. I'm going to come over here. Tighten this. One thing I want to make sure of is that I have a nice, good, solid base on that, and I do. When I go to plug this in to power, I'm just going to double check and make sure that it's off. I'll set it down. And as I go to plug this in, I just want to make sure that I have control of it just in case it does turn on me. If it isn't plugged in, it is not. So I'm good to go. The depth is pre-adjusted on this, so I don't really have to worry about setting that at all for it. When we do make a cut, what we're going to do is you have to make a gun with your right hand. You're going to lay it knuckles down on the piece that you're working. You're going to engage with your thumb and then run with your finger. If you engage this way and come this way towards me, what you're going to be doing is called a climb cut, and it's working against the machine. There are occasions where we have to do a climb cut, but for the best quality of your cut, you just want to engage and run it this way. So if I was running the outside of this, I would run this way, this way, this way, this way, counterclockwise on this one. If there's a big hole in the middle here and I wanted to run my router around there, I would engage and then I'd be running clockwise. So you can't just think about it clockwise, counterclockwise. You have to think about the thumb, finger, and then run it. So I'll go ahead and get my respirator on. Glasses, hearing protection. Now when I turn it on, I want to make sure that I have a good grip on it, because if I don't, it could wrench and get kicked out of my hands. Yeah, it throws out a pretty good amount of dust. I'm going to unclamp this and show you what the profile looked like, what the bit looked like. After I use the router, it's very, very important that I sweep up around here. I don't want a whole bunch of sawdust all over the floor. With the concrete floor and a little bit of dusting of sawdust in there, it can get really slippery like an ice rink, so we just want to be super, super careful of that. Alright, so I talked about the profile on these bits, and you can see that this one is very, very square, and it's got a roller bearing right there. So this one, when you engage it, would go in only as deep as that bearing, and then cut a square shoulder as deep as you set it on the router. This one would set like a rounded groove, a little cove. And this one you can see is a little bit more fun. It's more of an OG, and I believe on this one, this is an older one, it's missing its bearing, but it would have a bearing that limits the depth that you come in and cut. And then this one here has its bearing on it, so you can see it rolls right there. You make your cut, only goes as deep. You can adjust the depth this way, but that profile will end up on your wood. But this is the one that I end up using the most. It's just kind of clean. And this is unplugged, so I don't have to worry about it touching the cutter. If I come in here, you can see that it's just a round over bit. So what it does, it just breaks that edge into a radius. It has the bearing. The nice thing about the bearing is that limits how deep your cut is this way. It doesn't limit how deep it is this way, but it'll limit it this way because you can't cut any deeper than that. So if I have to go back and make 4 or 5 passes because I moved a little bit, so you saw me engage it, and then I kind of came off of it a little bit, but then I can go back and redo it, and it's never going to cut any deeper than that bearing. And then when we look at this board, we can see the results here. Let me see if I can get that in here. So you can see this rounded over right here, where this is still a nice crisp 90 degree as it came out of the factory. But that little round over that we did was from the router, and I would probably sand it up. This is a pre-finished ply, so you can see it's got a nice shiny coat on it. I would go in, clean it up, and then put some finish on the edge to make sure it try and matches that pre-finished coat. All right, so this is the last type of router that we're going to use, and this is called a router table. And what it is, if you go under here, you look in the box, you'll see the normal kind of mid-sized router. It's just mounted upside down. So you can see the cutters coming up through here. This is called a flush cut. So anything that this bearing rides along, it'll cut everything below that to the same profile. To adjust this, you're going to drop this in, and you can raise it up, or raise it down, or up. I'm going to drop this down a little bit, because I just want to demo how this works. So we'll go ahead and leave it there. I'm going to stay back below and move on. Okay, so this has a fence that's adjustable, so you can go back or forward and adjust how deep you want that cut to be, depending on the bit that you're using. Also has a little guard that goes over here. And unlike our other routers, this is hooked up to the whole class dust collection system. So when I go push the button, it kicks on the motor and it'll start sucking out of the bottom. It'll get rid of a lot of the dust. And then it's got this secondary hose over here that I have hooked up to a vacuum cleaner over here. So I'll turn on the whole shop dust collection, and that'll start sucking down through the hole, and then I'll kick on the vacuum and that'll suck it out to the side. Now when we work on this one, the cutter is turning in a counterclockwise way. So we want to feed our work into the cutter this direction. If we try and feed it this direction, it's kind of like a car doing a burnout, and it's going to take all of that energy and send it, and you can actually launch it across the room. And that's called a kickback. You definitely don't want to do that. So when we're working with this, we want to make sure that we're back. We're pretty far out of it. Our fingers are going to be out of the cutters, and then we can go and we can make our cut. We're going to go in that right to left motion across this one. This one doesn't really matter. We don't do a whole lot of inside routing, so like these holes I wouldn't route here necessarily. But same safety equipment as last time. I got to get my glasses, my respirator, and my hearing protection. So I'll go respirator first, make sure that's nice and tight. And glasses, and then hearing protection. And now we're going to turn on the dust collector. Turn on vacuum. The on-off switch is over here. And that is it for the router.